This Little Light of Mine, it's a beautiful little song, and today we're going to dive into how to harmonize it, drawing from the living reservoir of jazz and gospel harmony. This reservoir has been filled by the everyday practice of all kinds of musicians, but one of the mainstreams comes from the Black church and the musicians who are being pushed by their community, their artistic peers, to be excellent and to find new and fresh ways to approach the same material. One of the things that I've personally experienced as a musician in a gospel church is you don't always know who's going to sing what. So somebody's auntie might come up and start singing a song that maybe you're not so familiar with or you may not have heard it at all. The first thing you have to do is make sure you know the melody. Find the simplest possible accompaniment as quickly as possible. Survive it. Swing it. Make it groove. Support the singer as much as you possibly can. But then when you go home, maybe you check the song out, listen to a couple versions. The next time that song comes up, you've got an expanded palette of possibilities of what you can play on it. Now, if the auntie the next time she comes sings it again, and the musician is doing something they've worked on, an eyebrow goes up, or even worse, she loses her place, well, that might not have been the best choice of harmonies. But something interesting that refreshes a familiar melody, then that's a beautiful thing. This is not about finding the right accompaniment. It's a playful and fluid process of exploration. Yes, we will deal with some music theory. Some of the people that are the best at this, in my experience, are masters of music theory. Some people that I've personally learned the most from couldn't name anything in theory, but they were playing with an incredibly rich harmonic palette. So for me, coming to the tradition from the outside, it's useful to have theory to help us get inside. Music theory is descriptive, not proscriptive. What does that mean? It means it says what people do. It doesn't tell you what you have to do. Okay, that's a really important distinction. It's not about rules. It's about, this is what people tend to do, and what is familiar and what's been done in the past, so that you have some tools in your tool belt. I think I've used a few too many metaphors in this opening. And I'm going to be referring frequently to a PDF that you can see a link to in the description. Basic techniques of jazz harmonization. As I said, the first step is to be able to hear the melody. I would encourage you to make sure that you can hum this song before you go any further in this video. 1, 2, 3, 4. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. All right, so before you go any further, can you hum that melody? Can you hum it along with what I just sang? Can you hum it on your own? You really have to know the shape of the melody before you start trying to come up with chords for it. A lot of times, if you don't, you actually start changing the melody to fit your imagination of what the chords might be. So make sure you know the melody before you go any further. Okay, so now you know the melody. Before I put up the basic chords on the screen, what do you think the basic chords should be? Let's start out just working with 1, 4, and 5. Where do we need to change chords to support the melody? Press pause and see if you can come up with just the basic 1, 4, 5 chord progression for this little light of mine. All right, we're back, and here's how I think of the stripped down basics for this song. I'm using a simple stride style, and just the 3 chords. If you didn't come up with something similar to this, take a look at the worksheet that's on the screen. I'll also link that below, just to sort of get familiar with how do you harmonize notes of a major scale. A lot of different possibilities, but this song is leaning in a certain direction. If you're playing the same song week after week, you might start looking for some new colors. Half of my favorite songs use less than 4 chords. We're talking about developing our vocabulary here, so we can choose simplicity but not be confined. First 4 measures are all on the 1 chord. How can we add some color? Let's take a look at our first technique of harmonization, which shows that any chord you're going to, you can take the 5 chord of that chord as a way to get there. What's the first chord we're changing to? So we start out on 1, but where do we go from there? To 4. And what is the dominant, the 5 chord of 4? Okay, well, we're in the key of F. The 4 chord is B flat. So what's the 5 chord of B flat? It's F. Okay, this is confusing. How can we make the 1 chord, F, behave more like a dominant? Well, let's just add the 7th. Right? That makes it pull, act more like the 5 of 4. So that's one way to do it. We can also add a little walk up so that we're going to the leading tone of 4. So those two things together give us a nice little color change and some tension to get to the 4 chord. At the halfway point of the song, I'm also going to add this turnaround chord. Call it 4/5 or C sus, 5 sus. Doesn't have the same pull of 5 back to 1. It's a little bit more like 4/1. It's kind of the best of both worlds of 4/1 and 5/1. It has that nice root movement of 5/1, and it has earthy resolution of that 4/1 sound. It's a very typical gospel and soul turning chord. The next change I'm going to make is based on item 2 on our basic techniques of jazz harmonization. We're going to break up this long section of 1 chord here by harmonizing some of this melody with a 6 chord, the minor 6. That's the relative minor. Right? So we could go there directly, but remember that anywhere we go, you could go there first via a 5 chord, and it makes you feel like you've really gone somewhere new, even if only for a moment. And that gives that feeling of freshness and new arrival. So what's the 5 chord of that 6 chord, of that D minor? A7. So we're going to throw that in there. So now that we're at the 6th chord, we have the opportunity to use the circle of fifths to get back to 1. So let's do that. Right? The A to D sort of starts this circle of 5 ofs to get back home. I'm using a dominant chord on the 2 chord because I love the sound of this dominant 9 chord on the 2 here. It becomes a 5 of 5 instead of a 2, but we could still call it a 2. I just like it. It's broad, it's funky, and again, it's a classic gospel sound. And now, I should go back home to 1, but I'm going to kind of use this amen fake out ending, very typical in gospel. You might know it from the Beatles' Let It Be, but Paul McCartney got it from gospel. It's a whole second variation. All right, so to start off our third and final variation here, one common theme in reharmonization tricks is that you're kind of staying in one place while appearing to move. And a gospel walk-up is a really fun way to do that. as typified by the Thelonious Monk composition Blue Monk. And it turns out that Monk actually had his first professional gig playing with a Pentecostal singer on the gospel tour circuit in his teenage years. Let's keep reading in harmonization technique number 1. You can add a 5 before anything, but you can extend that cadence in a jazz context by adding a 2 before the 5. A 2-5 progression, 2-5-1, is the sort of molecule of jazz harmony, typical jazz harmony. So we're going to 4. We have 5 of 4. That's 1 dominant to 4. So what's 2 of 4? What's 2 of B flat? That's right. C, but C what? C minor. If we're in the key of B flat, the 2 chord is a minor. In fact, the 2 chord in any major key is always going to be minor, and in fact, a minor 7. Now we've got this long change of B flat going back to F, a long 4 chord going back to 1. This is probably the oldest church cadence as it harmonizes Amen. What do I mean? Back in Gregorian chant days, you didn't have to have any harmony, just sing Amen, Amen. It's seen a lot of changes. It's been used a lot. So let's look at technique number 4, which is all about the plagal cadence, otherwise known as the Amen cadence. Going beyond 4-1 is 4, sharp 4 diminished, and then 1/5. And since now on measure 7 we got a long time hanging out on 1 and going back to 1, that brings us to technique number 3. Anytime you have a 1 chord going to a 1 chord, you have the opportunity to add a turnaround. Typical jazz turnaround is 1, 6, 2, 5. Well, we've already arrived at 1, even though it's 1/5. So go directly to 6, to 2, 5. And I'm going to add a little color to that 6 chord. I'm still harmonizing this note, but I put a major third down below, which makes this a sharp 9 chord. Why a sharp 9 chord there? Because I like it. We're going to use the walk up again. And now we're headed to the 6 chord, and last time we just used the 5 of 6. But now we're going to add, like we did before, the 2 before the 5 to make an entire molecule of jazz harmony, a 2-5-1, where 1 is the 6. Why a half diminished 2 though? I'll say more about this elsewhere, but the normal 2 chord when you're going to a minor tonality, which we are, is half diminished. I'm not making this up. We could just end this like we did last time, but when I was doing a deep dive on this song for this video, I found this sweet little churchy move here, again related to technique 4 around the plagal cadence. It's a slide through minor 4 to arrive at 1/5. So let's look from 6. I love that. Now, why am I calling that a 4 chord if it's got a D flat in the bass? Well, to me, it's all part of this plagal movement. And finally, from there, we'll play our turnaround again. I'm going to use that flat 13 to catch the melody. I have that final little gospel harmonic riff. It's also called the turnaround to bring us back home. Let's play the whole thing.